Welcome to Canadian Studies from Brno, the podcast of the Canadian Studies Centre at Masaryk University. I'm your host, Dr. Denisa Krásná, and today I'm joined by Magdalena Fiřtová. Magdalena is an assistant professor at the Institute of International Studies at Charles University in Prague. Her research focuses on the political economy of North America and Canadian studies, with a particular emphasis on discourse framing and the political legitimation of climate policy. She is co-author of The History of Canada and has published in peer-reviewed journals such as the Journal of International Migration and Integration and the Journal of Canadian Studies. In 2024, she was a visiting professor at the Robarts Centre for Canadian Studies at York University in Toronto. Since 2010, she has been recognized for her teaching excellence with 10 Golden Course Awards, and she regularly contributes to public debates on Canadian politics in Czech media. Magdalena, welcome, and thank you so much for being here with us in Brno.
Thank you, Denisa, for having me.
Can you please tell us how you started focusing on Canadian studies in your research and teaching?
Well, my journey to Canada started almost 30 years ago already when I read Weekly Respect, and there was a job offer of the Canadian Embassy, and I was alumni of the University of Economics and also of French literature at that time. So they were looking for a French-speaking public officer. And my then boss, the counselor Alain Latulippe, was amazing, very amazing, inspiring and profound. He had really profound impact on me and on my career. So I spent 8 wonderful years at the embassy, doing a lot of cultural stuff like exhibitions, book grants, academic exchange. But like 2 years after I started working for the embassy, I kind of get an inner how to say kick into doing something academic, and I started doing what we call combined PhD or distance PhD, and I completely started doing immigration discourse, immigration policy at my current Faculty of Social Sciences of Charles University. So this was my way to Canada, and this was my love also, because I frankly I must say that this is a very much like hard thing, teaching Canada.
Oh, I didn't even know you had such a such a practical experience of working at the embassy. That's so interesting. So you also engage in public debates, often provide expert commentary to Czech media outlets. Do you approach your academic and public-facing work differently? Do you feel a responsibility as a scholar to engage beyond academia?
Well, first of all, I don't think that I'm really often engaged with media. My department, and it's quite interesting, my department had like last year 300 it was in 2024 when there were American elections, and my department registered 300 like media appearances in that year. So with my Canadian focus, it's kind of a niche in terms of public debate, but I still believe that the mission of academia has 3 pillars. The first one is, of course, teaching, and that is my favorite one. But there are also, of course, research, but outreach as a responsibility toward our taxpayers and public audience is also part of this mission of academia. And I'm very glad that that my boss, my department, and my institutes are kind of on the same vein here, because they do understand the importance of why we should go to media and talk to media, because we live in a time of really diminishing very professional journalism, and they need expertise. Otherwise, the space would be filled in by strange voices and strange content. So I think it's a really like a responsibility of academia and scholars to fill in that void. And when I read recently that Český rozhlas Plus had really a lot of good listeners and is one of the most successful radio station in the Czech Republic, it gives you very concrete empirical proof that listeners and audience really like the expertise and enjoy listening to experts. So my approach to public outreach is this one. It's a kind of a responsibility also to our taxpayers, if I can put it in economic terms.
Yeah, I completely agree, and hopefully you'll be there more often, because it means that Canada is represented more in Czech media, because you're the one they usually call. So you've received multiple teaching awards, as you said. That's your favorite part in academia. What do you think makes complex topics like climate politics accessible to students?
Well, it's true that I teach several courses focused on climate change, more and more. Now 3 are already there. Unfortunately, Canada appears only as a niche there, as a really small example. But I think usually the complexity needs a lot of expertise. And frankly, in climate politics, I don't feel an expert. So I teach those courses with a external ed with many experts. So I invite guest speakers and guest hosts to come and to provide the expertise. And I'm kind of a coordinator of those courses. But in terms of like political economy, that's my favorite as well. The ideal thing is to find the tension, and the tension with the real world. I mean, students usually connect to the topic where they see there is a kind of a disconnection between their image and their kind of sometimes naive picture of reality, and then they become very much interested. So those often normative and uncontroversial issues became very often the hook for their attention. And with Canada, they very often come to my class of History of Canada with very naive and stereotyped picture of a beautiful, peaceful, whatever you imagine country. And we go through it through the semester. We dismantle all the myths that they have. And very often they get connected to the topics where they see the clash between their ideal picture of a model country, but my or our discussion. So these clashes or tensions between real world and their naive pictures, usually this is something that what they appreciate, and why certain even difficult topic as a political economy can be interesting. And maybe the second response to your question is that what makes political economy interesting for Czech students, and they usually freak out when they see the term economics, because our students don't like it generally, because they are students of social sciences and area studies. But when we go through narratives, so importance is really to present them stories and narratives, and very often like stories about climate change. Like last week, what we did in the class of political economy of climate, we read the text that present people's story, really like human beings struggling hard to understand what's going on, and to really read their inner experience with the politics, and also disagreement and discomfort and resentment. It opens up their eyes that the politics is not only top down, but it's also a story. How we tell it, how we share those experiences, and that's it.
That's a great example. And what aspects of Canadian politics in particular tend to resonate most with students in Central Europe?
Maybe based on the topics of a bachelor thesis that Czech students choose to write on Canada with me, there are definitely immigration, the Arctic, and Indigenous people. Those three usually, and this is what I said. They somehow have certain idea of what Canada represents: immigration, model country for immigration, etc. We might talk about it later, but and then we discuss what different dark stories of Canada, and we discuss difficult choices that Canada made vis-a-vis minorities, etc. And this is what attracts the attention. With Indigenous people, I had great experience with the Valley of the Bird Tail reading. This is a fantastic book that gained many awards and book prizes. And the reading about, for example, Linda's shoes is so emotional and so captivating that students really kind of get to this tragical past of colonialism, of residential schools, and they come and really want to write a thesis on that. So this is a topic of importance for them because of that feeling and emotional experience that they get through readings, even in political science and social science that I teach. Yeah.
Another great tip for our listeners, Eva, who was here, and I think the second episode, she recommended 5 Little Indians as well, that connects these topics, the residential schools. And so let's move to your current research, to Alberta. What does climate change mean for Canada today, both in terms of real-world impacts and the country's political response?
Canada is an extremely interesting case study for climate research, and for different perspectives, several different perspectives. As your listeners, viewers can imagine, it's a first and foremost a northern country. That means that Canada is warming at more twice the rate of global warming, and its northern regions warm as fast as 4 times the rate of average warming on the globe. So this means that really like melting snow and ice reduce the Earth reflectivity in the north, and it creates kind of a feedback loop, what we call Arctic amplification, and the warming is faster and faster. And then the temperature is really rising faster than in many other parts of the globe, of the world. And right now I read that ice cover is at a historical low in Canada, in northern Canada. And it has major consequences for habitat, human life, biodiversity, etc. And melting permafrost is really dangerous, unstable coastline, etc. This is difficult for communities living in a distant part of the north. Also, what climate change means, that very often those communities are accessible only through the ice roads. So it means that in winter you can cross many lakes and through those icy roads, but with warming and melting ice, those roads are not anymore accessible, and you have to really reach those communities through flying connection, and for many of them it's unlivable. And not mentioning like Jasper's wildfire in 2024, that was a devastating wildfire for many communities, for the national park. And interestingly, for many listeners, this can be surprising. In 2021, like we had a major heat wave. We call it like the heat dome. And that was the deadliest weather event in history of Canada, because the level of temperature overpassed like 50 Celsius degree. So it was amazing. It was terrible and difficult event. So this is one part of the story of Canadian climate change. But politically and economically, Canada is also the biggest producer of carbon emissions, because Alberta, per capita, Canada is the second one in the world, producing really very high emissions, and it's really largely due to its oil sands extraction that is situated in Alberta and partly in Saskatchewan. And the problem is, I don't know if I should go into details, but the problem is that this is a very heavy oil, which is in mixed with clay, sand, bitumen, and it's difficult to extract. You need a lot of steam, a lot of water, a lot of gas to extract this oil from the ground, and it creates like a really huge ton of emissions. So climate change is interesting, like in terms of impact and changing environment in Canada, but also in terms of politics, because changing this pattern of a very huge and high emission per capita is difficult for the economy and for the transition out of the fossil fuel.
Thank you for this very important context. I think it will help us to, when we move forward to Alberta in particular. This is where your current research is focused on. Alberta as a key site of climate conflict. For listeners unfamiliar with Canadian politics, why is Alberta so central?
Alberta is one of the wealthiest provinces in Canada, but also the oil sands, as I mentioned, is concentrated in Alberta. So oil and gas is really like important for Canadian prosperity and for Alberta's prosperity, especially. Imagine that Alberta produces like 4 million barrels of oil per day, which is a little bit like half of what Saudi Arabia produces. This is really crucial for its GDP, for exports. All of this go to the south. Almost all of this goes to the south, to American refineries. But the conflict, you ask about my research. The conflict is that since 2015, Justin Trudeau, Liberal Prime Minister of Canada, was elected with the promise of tackling the issue of climate and promising really that Canada would be a responsible leader of climate. And he started to introduce and implement a climate policy that of course, was focusing and targeting oil extraction. And this is something that Alberta doesn't like. So Alberta sued, together with other provinces, Saskatchewan, Ontario, sued federal government for this implementation of a federal carbon tax, but they didn't win. The ruling of Supreme Court was that it is in competence and jurisdiction of a federal government to have a carbon tax. But Alberta was never happy with this pressure on its vital extractive industry, for sure. So it led to a lot of conflicts between federal government and provinces, and province, especially Alberta, and it created a lot of resentment within Alberta population. Yeah.
Mm. And so, but these tensions between the federal government and the provinces are nothing new, are they?
Well, you are right. Historically, Alberta was kind of a different province than the rest of Canada. Many Czech and usually Czech students and Czech listeners, they would understand that there is a Quebec apart, but Alberta is also very different. And there was this like alienation movement history of alienation between Ottawa and Alberta. In the 19th century, those who complained most were farmers. Later on, after oil shocks, of course, oil producers were unhappy with previous prime minister, father of Justin Trudeau, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, and it was again like imposing cap on prices of oil after the oil shock was something that Albertans never accepted. So there is this really long-lasting conflict between Alberta and Ottawa. Yeah.
Is climate policy today as much about identity and belonging as it is about economics?
Well, I think you cannot really separate them, especially in Alberta's case, because people that worked for oil company, they the work is part of their identity. And you cannot say to a worker who worked like dozens of years in extraction field that his job was nasty and dirty job. It's hard because everybody's trying to do his best, live his life as he can, and saying that his life is a dirty life is of course identity part, but it's also economics because these jobs are like supporting the economy, supporting livelihood, and also the standard of living. So I think both are interconnected very closely.
Definitely. And is Alberta unique, or does it reflect broader tensions within federations dealing with climate change?
I don't think it's well. The carbon tax was pretty much negatively received by several other provinces as well, and with carbon tax especially, we see a lot of opposition. So Czech listeners, they could imagine this is a kind of a ETS debate we have right now in the Czech Republic, and opposition to it, because carbon pricing is never easy, and usually those who with among the lower cohort socioeconomic cohort of population, they usually pay the most for those prices. But to be frank with Justin Trudeau, those people got their rebate back. So they really didn't pay the tax. But any tax is unpopular. So provinces like Prince Edward Island, they were unhappy because majority of their population uses oil heating. So the prices went up with carbon tax, and it was definitely like heavily criticized. And this is the reason why Mark Carney, before he was elected, as a part of his electoral promise, and before he was elected to the job, he immediately scrapped the carbon tax as a very unpopular measure.
Yeah. And you mentioned that the green transition creates asymmetrical burdens. Who pays the price for climate policy in Canada?
Well, I think nowadays it's majority of population, but I'm afraid that we will pay all of it in the future, because the costs will be are of course, if transition itself happens right now, the cost is concentrated in Alberta and in the sectors that creates the most of the emissions. But I would say the benefits of the transition will be more evenly spread across other provinces. So there is this conflict between right now and the future, but human mentality and human psyche and behavior is really risk averse, which means that risk aversion is a typical behavior that we prefer, like even risky thing now than sacrificing for the future, because it's unsure and unsecure, and we prefer rather not doing that.
Yeah, something that we see all around the globe right now. And how does this unevenness fuel political conflict in Canada in particular?
Well, for Alberta, it's definitely the threat of unity. Alberta, with their critique of Liberal government, started to run on kind of a dangerous slope of separatism, like searching for strengthening its sovereignty, and so climate politics kind of transferred into the danger of unity for Canada, especially with what we have as a president in the South. The United States would be happy to one day, if Alberta separates, to accept it as a 51st state to the United States, because it's a great producer of oil, right?
And do you think there's a risk right now of that happening?
Well, right now, no. I'm not sure. I think even the population of Alberta that accepts or is preferential for separation is relatively marginal. We talk about some like 8, maximum 15% of the population. But alienated climate policy was dangerous for this trend, and it created kind of frustrated Albertans who felt that they are not heard by Ottawa. And so they rather adopted this separatist view as a leverage It's a rather like rhetoric leverage so far, but you never know with Brexit. We haven't foreseen the result, right? So it's a dangerous slope that can become a real one.
Very true. And Canada and the US are often described as having one of the closest relationships in the world. Is Canada-US cooperation more driven by shared values or by economic necessity? What would you say?
All right. And I think President Reagan described in 1985 the relationship, the most productive relationship between any countries in the world. But it's true. Because I'm political economist, so if I start with economic side of your question, is that the US and Canada are really the closest allies. Like more than 70% of Canadian exports goes to South, to United States, to American market. But so there's certain asymmetry in that relationship. But we should not forget that also like 35 American states are dependent on Canada as well as a market for their products. So the asymmetry is here. But the agreement of NAFTA and later on of USMCA, or like we prefer saying CUSMA in Canada, was definitely very beneficial for both countries, and we should not forget that because a lot of economic growth and prosperity was gained through this close trade relationship. And there is also, but you ask about shared values. I think that shared values were undeniable as well, because it's a structural foundation of this relationship. After Second World War, we really have had two countries, Canada and the United States, to join the international world order with NATO. They created NORAD, so they created a system of a northern hemisphere or western hemispheric aerospace missile protection. So they were dependent one on each other through those institutions, but this was dependent on shared values of a multilateralism, of democratic values, and even if there were some disagreements during Vietnam or during Aero crisis, etc., I would say the founding ground for this relationship was in shared values for embedded liberalism and democracy. Yeah.
And how has the second Trump administration reshaped this relationship? Trump has repeatedly used the rhetoric about Canada becoming the 51st state. How should we interpret this? As a joke, a provocation, or something more strategic?
Well, unfortunately, the nasty rhetoric of President Trump seems completely illogical and unproductive, given the challenges that we as a world are, and especially democratic country, face nowadays. But at the beginning, I was responding to your question. The Trump is Trump. That was the only thing that was in my mind. But as longer he has been in the office, the harder it is to interpret such language as purely as a joke. And his previous ideas about purchasing Greenland and his readiness to involve the U.S. into military conflict in Iran shows that those statements, once dismissed as a rhetorical exaggeration, can no longer be taken and separated from real politics. So for many Canadians, this means unpredictability. And it has major political consequences because because a lot of tariff policy has a real impact on jobs in Canada. Many American companies, especially in automotive industry, has already decided to onshore their production to the United States. So, case of Stellantis in Ontario, which really in 2023 promised to build a plant on Jeep in Ontario, were changed, and we see that this unpredictability is really very dangerous for investment in Canada, because investors like to see the stable environment. So even if I see that maybe Trump is losing its power and is over the peak of his power, and Iran will kind of loosen the pressure that he has on Canada, it's still dangerous for Canadian economy. I'm always frightened when we see Trump approaching midterm election, for example, this November, that the closer he gets to the election, and the closer it will be clear that he loses control and he might lose, the more irrational he will be. So if we have like USMCA trade agreement to be renegotiated or under review this summer, we might expect both outcome, completely like Trump neglecting it because he's preoccupied by other things, but he can also be completely irrational and really scrap the agreement that provides job to hundred thousands of people in Canada.
And how do political leaders in Canada react to this rhetoric of Trump?
You know that Canadians, they already reacted because they elected a different leader than Pierre Poilievre. And Pierre Poilievre, as a conservative candidate to the job of a prime minister, he was very upset with this outcome. But Mark Carney, Liberal prime minister since last year, is outcome of Trump's approach to Canada. Canadians wanted a really pragmatic and strong leader, economically mostly. And so Carney promised that Canadians will sleeve up their moral and really be ready to punch back. So we see him like traveling all across the world. Like he had like 96 visits during last year all across the world, spending much of his time abroad in order to diversify, to find new partners, new markets. So we see him going to India, for example, and Canada had very bad relationship to India in recent year because of the murder of one of Canadian Indian citizen, and involvement of Indian intelligence services. So he's kind of refreshing old relationship, economic relationship with other countries. He traveled recently to China to sign there a contract, an agreement about EV electric cars. We saw him traveling, of course, at the beginning of his leadership to European Union to secure really access of Canadian products to EU market. So we see definitely he is very pragmatic in terms of searching partners, alliances, and making coalitions in order to face tough Trump in White House. So I would say that Canadians don't give up. They continue struggling. We saw positive results. Recently, I read that despite the fact that 16% of Canadian exports to the United States shrunk last year, this was kind of compensated by 17% of exports going to other non-American markets. But definitely, I think the future is unsecure and unsure.
Yeah. And do you also work on immigration? And I'm wondering how important is border security in the Canada-US relationship today?
Yeah, the immigration, it's an important question, especially border security was part of the Trump's rhetoric, right? At the beginning, when we saw the first attack on Canada, it was justified by fentanyl crisis and fentanyl insecurity across the Canada-US border. But it was false, by the way, very much. But yeah, historically, Canada and the United States have shared the longest, largely unsecure border. And after the 9/11, 2001, the border became securitized. But it is very much the longest border. So you couldn't control it entirely. So there was there were many of irregular access points that were, especially in previous, like in recent years, used by immigrants to cross from the United States to Canada to search asylum, refugee status in Canada, to get access to more gentle, if we can say it, put it in a simple way, faster access to refugee status in Canada. But under the pressure of U.S. administration, especially it was at the time of Biden administration, those crossing borders and crossing points were closed. And the example is Roxham Road, for example. It was a typical one. So Canada kind of needs to cooperate because of this asymmetrical dependence on the United States. Canada needs to find a way how to appease to the United States, accommodate their pressures. And with immigration, they're also had to securitize this border because of their own vulnerabilities of their own system, because there was recently a lot of like public backlash against previous immigration policies. Yeah.
And that just goes or responds slightly to my next question, that Canada's immigration system has undergone recently important shift with the country tightening its rules. Why is this happening? Is it because of this pressure from Canadians themselves?
Oh, yeah. The thing is that definitely Canada was historically one of the openest country in the world to immigration. Canada is immigration country, and I remember Alain Latulippe, my former counselor, when he entered the room and started his presentation to Czech audience, he said, in Canada, everybody is immigrant. It was kind of a shocking intro, but it's true. And Canadian immigration policy has like for second half of 20th century was really open policy. Of course, controlled, managed, very much managed, but open policy. And this after pandemic, after COVID-19, Justin Trudeau wanted to fill the labor shortage and accelerate economic growth. So his government kind of even open it more and really like loosen it regulation of immigration, especially for temporary workers and for international students. So it had, as a result, inflow of more than 2 million newcomers per year in 2020. I think it was 2023 alone. So there was a huge cohort of those who were selected as economic immigrants, like 500, almost like 400 something thousand. And there was a huge, more than 1 million of international students coming to Canada on false purposes or on right purposes. There was a clear fraud on the side of education providers, but there is this huge number of temporary workers as well. And if you have such a huge number of people coming annually to the country, it creates a huge strain on affordability, on housing, on social services, schools, etc. And this had a really very negative impact on perception of liberal governments, but also on perception of of immigrants as such. So this was also very, very dangerous slope that it started to take. Yeah, and it's unfortunate because really Canada is an exceptionally open and diversified society. So we see that management of immigration is a kind of a very delicate balance between control and openness and the regulation and really description of precise measures, how you really guide the people into the market, and also how you accommodate in terms of housing, etc. It's a difficult task, and it's really not easy.
Yeah. Well, let's now circle back to teaching, because you also teach on immigration and economics in a course that we co-teach together. It's an international summer course on Canada called Comprehending Canada. We have been offering it for the past 6 years, and we co-teach it with 3 other international experts. The course brings together students from across Europe, North America, and beyond. And so I was wondering if you can share a little bit about your experience with this kind of course, if this collaboration changes how you think about Canadian studies as a field, or what does this international classroom dynamic add?
It's Comprehending Canada was a kind of very special experience for me, because for example, Jeff, one of our colleagues, Jeff Ayres, I've never seen him in person, but for many years we've been in touch through Zoom, and we've been working together. So it's interesting that even this like Zoom style connection can bring a real friendship and long relationship. So I enjoyed teaching it, and I it's really rewarding for me, because I usually get their readings, and I'm interested in what they teach. So this is eye-opening for me. It's kind of get me connect with topics that are discussed in North America, because Richard Nimijan is a Canadian. So it's a way how I get connected to current Canadian topics as well, and how they approach it. So it's a very rewarding from this perspective. But interestingly, it's also rewarding because I see, for example, American students involved, and they are really specific for me, because I would question why someone from America would subscribe to a course taught by a couple of like teachers from the Czech Republic to teach them about their northern neighbor, right? But interestingly, and this connects to the asymmetry between Canada and the United States, is that U.S. takes Canada very much as a granted, and they kind of don't know very much about them beyond the stereotypes, and so it's revealing to see. To see them learning something through my like Czech perspective on Canada. It's a funny story from me.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And we very often, almost every year, we get a few American students through mostly Jeff Ayres, and they're his students from St. Michael's. Even I would even stress more that they are from Vermont, so very close to the Canadian border. So quite revealing. But that's not to say that they don't know anything. They just want to broaden their perspective. Do you think that students engage differently in an intensive short-term course compared to a semester-long one?
Well, I mean, Zoom and online teaching is difficult for me in general. But this one, it's really like 1 week course, and students can get connected, and I feel that all of them are really like subscribed and registered, not because they have to. So they are really interested. Some of them, of course, we don't see them often, but majority of students in this course is really interested, genuinely interested in Canada. And despite the fact it's like online Zoom, which I dislike, they are connected, and there are many truly vivid interconnection between them. So I recommend it to my students.
Yeah, so do I. And I think even the fact that we still teach it online over Zoom, which was only the plan during COVID, but now it's the 6th year and we still teach it over Zoom. It just means that it's working and we still get plenty of students from across the world, which is something we wouldn't get if we were to host it here.
Yeah, but maybe one element is interesting for me as well, because normally I teach students of political science or social sciences, and those are students for cultural studies and from literature fields, and it's different. For me, it's challenging because I have to explain the topics that are normally present in a complex way. I have to think twice before I present it to students of literature, something like oil sands and Dutch disease or petrostate, etc. So those are challenges that make me grow or sometimes challenges pedagogically. Yeah.
Amazing. I have a few wrap-up questions. What excites you most about the future of your work or field?
It's still the challenge to make people discover one of the geographically largest country that is almost invisible for them. That's something that I believe is very important, despite the fact that our attention is so much oriented toward Donald Trump and his attention, etc. I think still it's worth studying Canada, knowing what's happening in Canada, because many of struggles they have, a lot of problems that they have, the fact that they share the border with with the United States is something that is worth teaching, and students should know about it, especially students of at my department of North American Studies. They shouldn't just isolate themselves within American experience, and teaching Mexico and Canada should be part of the curricula of North American Studies, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there emerging trends, ideas, or voices that you're particularly inspired by right now?
Well, it's not necessarily in Canada, I must say. I because I was very much plunged into climate politics and climate policy, so I read a lot about fossil capitalism, overshoot ideologies, and the political economy of climate. So those are like why the price why the price is wrong. For example, by Christophers. Those are authors that very very much inspire me because this is one of the response why we don't see so much progress on climate diplomacy and climate politics. So they provide me a lot of food for thinking. Yeah.
And what are you currently working on?
Oh, yeah, that's the topic of Alberta climate politics. That's one. But I also have to work on America, because I'm part of the American team of our department. So we also prepare a book on American history together with my colleagues.
Wow, amazing. Yeah. Well, big job. You did the Canadian history and now you're delving right into the American one.
We have to be versatile, right?
Yeah. And finally, what should we be paying attention to as observers of Canadian politics?
Oh, yeah, that's... I think Mark Carney is a very clever and smart guy, but he has a tough job. So USMCA, the trade agreement between Canada and the United States, is something to be observed, because politically it might be very, economically it might be very tragical if the agreement is somehow abandoned. Also, I would pay a lot of attention to Alberta, the way how Alberta politics is moving toward separatist, and Quebec is kind of on the same way, right? Because they will elect their new premier this year, and apparently this will be Bloc Québécois again. So those are the stories that I will definitely watch to see whether Canadian unity is still confirmed and still is challenged or not. But from climate politics, my passion field, I will definitely observe the capacity of Mark Carney to balance and to see whether he's able to promote extractive energy in this sector while also curbing emissions. That apparently is his promise, but I'm really like waiting whether this is possible to make the balance between both. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the tips. And thank you, Magdalena, for taking the time to be here with us on this podcast on Friday.
Lovely being here. Thank you, Denisa.
And thank you, our listeners, for being here with us. I hope you now feel more encouraged to follow Canadian politics, climate politics, global issues, and the ways politics shapes our lives. Don't forget to subscribe to Canadian Studies from Brno, wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us on Instagram at CanadianStudies_Muni. Thank you all for listening, and we look forward to welcoming you for our next episode.